All right, welcome everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment as folks join in. So take a minute or two to get settled in, and we will start our panel this morning and afternoon, depending on where you're joining in from. And for those of you who are just joining us, go ahead into the chat and drop us a little line of where you're joining, what company you're representing. Would love to hear from you, and little introductions in the chat. We want to keep this engaged throughout this conversation. All righty, we have one. Hi, KK. KK is on our team here at Insight. Awesome, loving it.
I love the dropping in the chat. This is great.
Yes, loving it. Okay, so I will go ahead and get us started, go through some housekeeping and get this show on the road. So welcome everyone. My name is Danya Madhusudan. I support our people community here at Insight Partners. Today's panel is a part of our Women's History Month programming, and we're super thrilled to be highlighting these phenomenal leaders in our network that you're going to be hearing from today. So before we begin, I have a few things to go over. This session is recorded. If you would like to share this recording with your network, you'll get the link by the end of the week. It'll also be on our website and Insight Go for those of you who are part of our portfolio. We've sourced our discussion questions from all of you during registration of what you submitted. So we're really excited to talk about what folks are excited to learn about. But we also have the chat Q&A function open throughout this conversation. So if you have additional questions, drop it in there, and then we'll use the chat function to discuss and chat with one another as well. At the end of this session, we have a 30-second survey that's going to pop up on your screen. So please take a moment to give us some feedback. We read all of your feedback and incorporate it into our future sessions. So we're really looking forward to that. We're really grateful to be able to host these types of webinars and engage with our larger community to address topics head on in a supportive environment. And for those of you who are part of our portfolio, we encourage you to join our CEO Scale Up Pledge community. We have the opportunity for your company to gain access to this community of committed people leaders and culture bearers in your organization who are building teams with a lens of equity and inclusion. We send out monthly newsletters to keep you updated. We have partner programming, monthly digital events to leverage peer-to-peer learning. And then we have training programs as well. So if you'd like to learn more, I'm going to add some of this information into the chat and would love to talk more. And as we get started, I'm going to start a poll just to get folks warmed up on what is your go-to leadership fuel and what best describes your leadership style today. When you have a moment, answer these as you can, and I will go ahead and hand it off to Hillary to start us off, introduce herself, as well as the panelists today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Danya, and welcome everyone. I saw from Philadelphia to Portugal and from Milwaukee over to San Mateo. It's just wonderful to have all of you here. Really excited to introduce our panelists. I am very curious what the go-to leadership fuel is and leadership styles, though, so I'm not sure we're going to wrap that up, but I'll try to keep my eye on that poll and share that. We have three truly wonderful women to be bringing you their stories and their insights today. We're going to be anchoring around a couple key areas: career navigation, some items around authenticity and leadership, and then definitely some areas on inclusion with some fun questions in the end. Like Danya said, please make sure that you share some in Q&A, and we'll get to them if time allows for that side of it.
And
as
Hillary,
Danya
I
shared,
can share the results if
you know
you.
the poll, go for it.
Yeah, I'm gonna share it. Yeah, it looks like we're throughout.
Excellent.
A little bit throughout all the answers. So that's great. Thanks for participating, everyone.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you, Danya. So hopefully everybody's got their mentors and peers here that maybe you can find some more. Everybody shared what was in chat. And maybe if you've got some coffee, if you're in the morning or afternoon, you'll get fueled up to join us. But really excited to introduce again these three wonderful women. I'm going to have Diane go first and introduce herself and share a little bit about her career and some of the ways that a career-defining moment maybe defined her leadership style. We'll then go to Lee Margaret and Arena, but thinking that that's a great way to do an introduction is for them to just start sharing their stories with all of you here. So Diane, take it away.
Great, thanks. So the first third of my career, I wasn't in IT. In fact, my first job out of college was running a startup. And I actually learned that while I thought my goal was to be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, I didn't like leading a startup. It was too much risk. But fast forward, after the first 10 years and some good mentorship and guidance, I had leaders that said, you really should move into IT and do this technology stuff. So I have followed, for the most part, the corporate technology path for the rest of my career and have been a CIO of large global multinational companies for the last 15 years. So in terms of the career defining moment, there's a little bit of a twist. So when I was at Textron, and it was before I got my first global role, corporate asked me to move to take a role that I didn't really want, but I've learned since then that sometimes when somebody else asks you to take a role, you need to have a little bit of faith that they're doing it for the right reasons for you. And sure enough, it eventually parlayed into having the global CIO role at Textron. But how it changed my leadership style is the business unit president that I was working for at the time. She was having a conversation with me and she said, you do know you're being groomed for the top role, don't you? I said, no, I had no idea. Nobody told me. And it really took me a while to get my head around the fact that I could do this. And other people believed that I could do that. And it was so pivotal for me to have that she had that conversation with me, that it's really changed how I do mentorship and grooming and coaching, and to let people know you have potential and I see that potential and you need to recognize that potential in yourself. Now let's figure out how we unleash it. So that's my intro.
Well, Diane, I already have chills. Thank you. I think sometimes it does just take somebody saying, I believe in you, you can do this. And it just unlocked immediately for folks to hear that. And I think that's such a wonderful story. So thank you. All right, Lee Margaret, we're going to turn to you, our CEO of Mural. If you can tell us a little bit about a career defining moment for you and how that maybe shaped your leadership style.
Totally. So I've had multiple career defining moments, but probably one of the most significant ones was around the time I had been in product and R&D for a really long time, but was really sort of considering where I wanted to go from there, and was encouraged, similar to Diane, was encouraged to try something completely new in M&A and mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, and was really sort of prompted and pushed into a new direction, which really gave me a whole different sense around the business acumen and led me into the next series of roles around marketing operations, and then ultimately to the role I'm in today. But I agree that the path is not straight or linear. It's really around staying curious and finding sponsors that believe in you and continue to push you to places you're probably uncomfortable, but that's really when you are learning the most. So big moments for me, and was exciting to get to learn and have all those different experiences.
Wait, are you going to give a little of your background? You have such an interesting background.
So my background is primarily it's kind of a wild and crazy ride, but was primarily growing up in product development. So lots of R&D experience, not the typical probably path to get to the CEO spot, but really, really heavy in design and product. And then stepped into more around marketing, picked up all of the user experience, used all of those same things to really define how we go to market around marketing, and then started to pull all that together in more operational roles, which really led to this. But no, not a sales background or a finance background. but lots of curiosity and support from a lot of different directions.
So
And I
thank
come
you,
from a
Margaret.
little small town too.
We were talking about small towns we were from
Mhm.
before we jumped on the webinar for that side of it. And I think it isn't always a straight line. And we'll maybe talk about that a little more as we
Yep.
dive into the career navigation side of it. All right, Arena, I'm going to ask you to go next. And again, that career defining moment that really locked into your leadership style that you have today.
Great. Do you still want us to do the background or no?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Hillary. After I pushed LM, I was like, so I'm Irina. I'm originally from Ukraine. I start there because I think that immigrancy and we came over as refugees to the US in the late 80s really formed my entire view on life. I think there's two lotteries, the geography that you're born to, which I very clearly lost, and then the parents that you're born to, which I won. And so then they took me to the right geography. I originally started in finance, mostly because financial independence was so important to me. And somebody told me that is what you do to get some financial independence. And so I started investment banking, doing M&A, then went into private equity on the investing side. And we'll get to it later, but I just think, especially for women, understanding P&Ls and financials are just so important. And I think it's one of the things that holds us back. And we hold ourselves back because it's an illusion of not understanding a P&L. So I am somebody that really believes in helping people get through that barrier because it's just addition and subtraction. But realized that finance was not for me, just wasn't where my superpower was and what I love doing. Moved over to the operation side, and I get to be a second-time CEO with Hootsuite, and we are on a mission to help companies figure out how to drive performance and results and business impact off of social. It is the largest platform in the world with 5 billion people spending 3 hours a day. And it's time to be one of our company's most important sales channels and communication channels. So we are helping enterprises around the world leverage it in that way. I think for me, there were two things that were really impactful. One, when I was in my Wall Street career, I looked around and I didn't want to be the number one leader. And they were all men, but I looked around and said, I don't want his job. It didn't really talk anything to that person. It was just the values in that firm or what you needed to get ahead. It was very much you had to take from someone, you had to push someone to get to the top. It wasn't a build the pie, make it bigger. It was much more individual contributor kind of role. And I just realized that's not what I wanted to be. And that kind of started the journey of moving to the operation side. And similarly, I'll give the example of when I became a first-time CEO, I got to watch an incredible CEO before, and he was in his 60s and a man, and he was great and very respected leader. So when I became a first-time CEO, I decided I'm going to do what most people do, copy the good example you saw. And it really did not land well. And what I realized is I was leading but not getting fellowship because I just wasn't leading in my authentic self. And the advice I got from a mentor at the time was just be Irina. And I thought that that was very simple and very strange. And I was like, how do I do that? Can I have a rule book? And how do you be yourself? And you just, COVID really kicked my butt into gear because you didn't have the time to start thinking a double narrative of here's the leader I should be, or here's how I should act as a CEO. Here's what I should do as a CEO. And it was the best advice. And I still go to it a lot when I think of what should I do. I think just be Irina, be yourself.
Irina, thank you. I loved a couple of things that you said in there, and I just want to highlight that sometimes your superpower is not what you love, and how can you make that shift? And also that concept of pie. It's like that credibility pie of you can always make another pie, and it doesn't have to be a scarcity environment, which I think is
Totally. And getting out of that scarcity mindset, I think, is really hard. And to be honest, I don't think I really hit it until Hootsuite, where I was just so focused on making sure I get the best deal or getting the last dollar when you're negotiating. And it's okay because you're building a relationship that you never know how you can help someone or someone can help you in the future. So it is a very big change shift.
It is. I'm going to come back to you because I think there's a great question to follow up about adapting your leadership style and what you've needed to do there. And you kind of touched on it in that arena of I didn't want to follow what this gentleman did. It didn't quite work. I had the leadership, but not the fellowship. Can you talk a little bit more about that and maybe share a little bit of your playbook of how you became you as Irina?
Yeah. I think I'm still leaning into it because you learn every time with, you surround yourself with different people. And I had one style that was really effective as a leader. And it was one that was energetic and driving, but I also led with a lot of how to, of the way I communicate is I tell people the how to, which is how my brain works. So, for example, if I'm like, hey, can we drive this result? Can we do this X, Y, Z? And I don't actually expect people to do what I'm saying, but without the context of giving people permission, a lot of people will just take what I'm saying and go execute it. And one of the things that I've been working on is if you are bringing in really smart people around you and you're putting leaders that hopefully are smarter than you don't want to limit them with the how to. What you want to really limit them with and inspire them actually with is here's the problem, here's the context, here's the vision of what we're doing, here's the problem of what we're trying to solve. You go figure out the how to, and I'm here as a sounding board for you. And I didn't appreciate that earlier on as I was doing it. It worked for a specific type of person that could kind of ignore my part of it, take it and just go do their own work. But to a lot of people, they thought, oh, well, if the CEO is telling you the how to, you should go execute on that. And they'd bring me back what my how to was. And I would say, that's not what I actually want. I want you to come up with your own independent thinking. And I just realized that for different personalities, different leaders, it's my job to adapt my leadership because it's very easy for people to want to adapt to a CEO. And then I'm just going to get cookie cutter me's, which is definitely not what I want. And so I've been on my journey and am on that journey because as many as there are people in the world, is how many different personalities and leadership styles you need to have. So it's just this ongoing journey that never ends, but it also makes it exciting so that you're constantly learning how to get the strengths out of people too.
Thank you. I think I saw something pop up in the chat of like, that's a great point. And I think there's been a fair amount of us who've fallen into the, I'm going to tell you how to do it versus I came to you as the who and what I need and, plug in your superpowers to make sure that that's really happening on that side of it. All right. I'm going to come back to Lee Margaret. I know y'all are kind of jumping on and off mute, so I want to give you that opportunity to do that. But you talked a little bit about that you maybe don't feel that you've had that conventional career path. You didn't come into a CEO as sales or finance and that side of it, but your story is wonderful and it's beautiful. So can you talk a little bit more about how you really navigated your progression and path to get to where you are, which is, I think, really exciting and inspiring, I would assume, for the folks that we have on the phone.
Totally. Basically, I think that the constant theme throughout my entire career was really a love and a passion for users and for the psychology behind human behavior is just incredibly fascinating to me. Even though my career has had a lot of variation, the commonality is just really the study and sort of support of why do humans act the way they do? If they say something in a research study, what is their behavior in the way they interact in a software or on a site or an app different? And so that's continued to fascinate me. And it kind of ties back a little bit to something that Irina said, which has been a huge, force multiplier in my roles, all of them, is really thinking with the outcome in mind, starting from that point of view, and really what you want to rally teams around and what I have been rallied around as part of my career is what is the outcome I'm trying to get to or what are the outcomes we're trying to get to as a team. Once teams are aligned on those things, then everything else sort of makes sense. You could have 100 200 different ways to get there, then it's just a matter of trying and experimenting and innovating, whether that's your teams themselves or the things that you're working on to get there. So as far as my career path, I knew that once I got to a certain level, and as I started to look at my next steps in joining, an organization in a CEO spot, it was really important to me to be thoughtful, and I had great sponsors and mentors who pushed me on this, that the right fit mattered, the right fit in terms of what the ownership model, who was on the board, but also the type of company. And I'm so fortunate as the leader of Mural. Mural is a visual collaboration platform. It is very, very user-centric. We're hyper-focused on transforming and empowering go-to-market teams to plan and align and execute faster. And for me, it was the perfect marriage because it's a very product-based organization. The product is at the heart of it. And so I knew that when I found the right thing, that background would actually be an asset for me and would be something that the organization needed to get to the next phase. And I'm just really lucky that that it all came together, and that's really where I landed. And it's just, such an incredible opportunity with incredible teams that are, really hyper focused around the product and user experience of the platform.
Thank you. I love the way that you're taking the outcome kind of first. And so I have to ask, did
Sure.
you have somewhere along the line CEO as an outcome that you wanted to get to, and then you backed into it maybe along the way in your career
Yeah.
steps?
That's such a great question. I did not say point blank, and in fact, I was encouraged in this direction. I want to be a CEO. I have always gravitated towards leadership roles. I like being able and the energy of being able to bring people together towards those outcomes, towards those goals with a lot of, lots of enthusiasm and passion and energy, sometimes to a fault. But yes, I definitely have always gravitated to leadership roles. I really wasn't particular whether that needed to be, the top spot, or it needed to be a role as a number two spot that is leading multiple teams. But I was always very clear that I wanted, the ability to operate and get things done. That's what's most important to me. And I think it's important for anybody, whether they're considering, what it is they want to do, to really get beyond a title and be thoughtful about what it is I enjoy. What do I want to wake up every day and do? And who do I want to do that with? Because I've just found that matters as much or more than any specific title. So for me, that was my path. And then I had lots of encouragement to go into different areas and try new things.
Excellent. Thank you. I know that was kind of an unplanned question coming
Oh,
your way.
totally.
Well,
It's a great
but
question.
it actually ties beautifully into Diane and something that I know she wanted to talk about, which is really important. I know folks have probably heard about your network is your net worth, and what that might mean for you moving forward. And Lee Margaret, you just talked about the people you work with and the people you meet along the way are really critical. So Diane, I know that you've spoken about it, for years, about the value of building a strong professional ecosystem. And that's something that isn't always described that way or discussed that way. And I think it might tie to how you introduced yourself and folks saying, you can do this. You know that this is your path that we want you to do. Can you kind of weave those together and talk a little bit more about what a professional ecosystem is for you and how you've used that?
So I'll start with when I was younger, it was all about, I can do it myself. I don't need help from anybody, and had something to prove to the world, which I had it all wrong. And there's an African proverb, and I paraphrase it such to say, she who wants to go fast goes alone. She who wants to go further goes together. And it took me so long to learn that I need my personal board of advisors. I need my suppliers. I need my family and my spouse to really achieve everything that we need to do. So I had to learn humility and had to learn the lesson that asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. I think so often we're trying so hard to achieve something and think that it shows vulnerability or weakness if we're asking for help, when if you recognize what you can and can't do, you can achieve so much more if you're putting together the right team. So whenever I start a role, I look left, right, and center. Who do I need help from in this particular situation, in this moment, in this role? And who I need help from changes moment to moment, but it really is a strength, not a weakness, to seek help and get the right help.
Hillary, do you mind if I piggyback on what Diane said for a second?
Absolutely.
I really identify with what you said, and specifically on, one of the biggest mistakes I made as a first-time CEO was I thought, okay, well, I've been an operator before. I've done bigger versions of the problems I'm seeing now. I'm good. I know how to handle this. And the part that I didn't appreciate is putting people around me that have been a first-time CEO, that have seen what being a CEO is, because the responsibilities that you have as a number one are different from a number two. And how this applies to everybody listening is a lot of times the things that get you to the spot that you're in and the promotion that you get, you think, great, I know how to get there because I just earned the promotion. But what you need in that new role is usually not the same skill set and the same experience that got you there. And there's no way to step out of your own body and to get experiences that you just don't have yet. And so, how do you find the people that, whether it's you just got a VP role, whether you just moved into a different function, like LM was talking about, that she moved a lot of different functions, how do you actively go out of your way to find these kind of mentors? And I don't like the word mentor, but find people who are willing to help invest in you and your career because you've never done it. And there's, to Diane's point, you can't do it without having that experience set. And so creating a few people that have been that VP before, that have made that mistakes, but also align with your values, so that when you hear them give you advice, you're thinking, okay, I can do this. This makes sense. Versus when somebody gives advice, you're like, no, that's not how I would handle it. And so putting those people around you to help you see around corners, I just think will allow you to go so much faster. And that's on us to do. And one of the things I appreciate about Insight is they're very proactive in helping leaders, especially in first-time roles, surround people with that. But that's on all of us if you all are not as lucky to have Insight in your world.
Thank you, Rena. I think
100%. Just to
yeah.
like double down on that. And sometimes it's awkward because the things that got you there are actually things you need to unlearn for the next one that was like, but that was like my go-to and it was so solid. And I think having that community around you is just so critical to be able to point out, yeah, that makes total sense and probably did in, in past lives, but it's not the exact right thing here. So I think being comfortable and vulnerable, opening yourself up to just continue to be awkward and have people support you through that is super important. Definitely identify with that, to both Diane and Irina's point.
Well, thank you. I am already walking away with making sure that I have a list of my board of advisors, if you will, how that might change. If I'm number one, what can I learn from number two? If I'm number two, what can I learn from number one? And then how do I learn and unlearn as I'm going along that way from that group of folks? And tying those together, I think is it's tricky, but it is really necessary. And we've got three amazing women telling us that that's all, that they've all done that. So I think that's really, really powerful.
So Hillary, let me just double down on this for one more minute. So, I just started a new role at Smurfit Westrock a couple of months ago, and it is an Irish company that was originally family held, and the culture is 180 degrees different from where I came from at Johnson Controls. They're both global companies, manufacturing, industrial, 100,000 employees. The style that I need to use to be successful is very different. The core of who I am isn't, but my approach and the pace and how I do it, I had to be very intentional in how I show up here to make sure that I'm aligning with that. So unlearning behaviors was something I took some time between the two jobs to work with my executive coach to help me unlearn things that I knew would be a disservice in the new role. Anyway, just wanted to highlight a reality of a situation every day.
I think it's incredible. And I kind of kicked it off in the beginning of how we would go through career navigation and then jump into authenticity. And I think you've done that just brilliantly. So let's talk a little bit about that, of how do you unlearn, take the style of a new culture or build the style of a new culture while still maintaining your authenticity? And I'll open it up to all three of you to kind of kick that off, or a version of that question that you think would really resonate with our group.
Well, I can just continue for a moment that a method is different from who you are as a person, right? So a method is, do I talk to the CFO before I talk to the HR? Do I do an email versus a PowerPoint presentation? Do I do a group meeting? I mean, just to burn down. But authenticity is how I show up, what I share, how I get to know somebody. So you have to be able to separate who you are and what are the methods that you use to operate. Sure, there's an intersection, but one doesn't define the other.
I love that. I think for me, one of the things that I've really come around is when I started my career in finance, I would never have worn red lipstick. I probably would have never worn a red shirt to a webinar of any kind. And I would put a lot of thinking into how to make sure that I fit in, while still being able to have an opinion and voice and give a voice on things that matter so that people hear me for my voice and don't kind of judge based on how I show up. And one of the things that I've kind of given into over the last few years is just being authentically me, because that is time and capacity that I do not want to spend on thinking. I'd rather take that energy and think through the strategy of the business. How do I enable my team? How do I hire the right team? And one of the magical things that I saw is people around me lean into that and feel like they can bring their authentic self to work. I'll give you 3 examples. When I started my career on the operations side, I would never want to put an emoji or an exclamation mark or anything in an email because the people I worked with looked very different than me, came from a very different background, and that's not what they did, and it would look unprofessional. I wouldn't look serious. And my first CEO job, I kind of just got tired of rethinking every single email. And when somebody shared that they won $1 million deal, I wanted to put emojis and a little pump up arm and whatever else. And so I just have given into it. And one of the things that happen is people embrace the vulnerability and they bring their selves. And I think as leaders, one of our jobs is, if we're spending all this time and our number one asset, our number one way to get to growth, to build anything, is through our teams and our people. And we want 100% of their brains to show up. We want them to feel comfortable to question what's happening, to see data and say, this is wrong. And one of the ways that they feel comfortable of creating that environment is they don't have to think of how they show up. They can just be. And so I've just leaned into that. When there's a baby that comes up on the screen, I try to highlight that, because that means there is a mother or a father that is balancing a lot of things, and there's nothing shameful about that. And so it's just leaning into things that feel very natural instead of having to double think. And so now when I catch myself saying, should I do that? Can I do that? I immediately know, don't do that. Just go do it. Stop with the double questioning.
And just to kind of add to that, one of the things that I have definitely gotten more comfortable with is that it's okay to be multi-dimensional. I feel like sometimes, in today's time, and especially as you're in leadership, it's like there's a persona that you're trying to establish. And I think we all have to be really comfortable that we can be layered, right? We can be multi-dimensional. We can be powerful and also be soft. We can be
I
assertive.
love that. Lee Margaret, I
So-
love that. Can you say that again?
but it's challenging, right? Because you feel like you've got to be this persona of who you think you should be. And so just getting increasingly comfortable in your own skin and whatever that is for that day in that moment. If you want to go hopping through the fields, or you need, to put on your heels and be walking down the street, it really doesn't matter. Just be you, be yourself, and be comfortable that you're going to have different flavors of your personality. Just as part as being authentic, to me, is just being multidimensional.
Did you say hopping through the fields? Just
Flowers, right? Like you can
love
have that version of yourself. You can see the sky.
I love that.
You can be all of those things at once, and that's okay.
Lee Margaret, I think that's an excellent point. And a lot of the questions that came in from the crew before they joined was around the double bind. And sometimes the antidote to the double bind, if you can be this or that, is to have that and multidimensional. I am this and that, and I am these extra layers as well. So I think, as often as I've heard that, and I co-lead our women's ERG here at Insight. And so I have to remind myself of that we are all multidimensional and in bringing those different areas to it. I wanted to touch on one thing you said, Irina, and just underline it, which is around when we spend our time and energy on not being our authentic selves, it is really just a vampire of that time and energy for us. So something that I really appreciated that you shared that side of it. I know there was a part here that I wanted to jump into about kind of key principles in your leadership and what that looks like. I'd love if each of you could maybe share your top 2 kind of leadership principles that you're really anchoring into yourself in these roles that you have as they are kind of changing, and you're just continuing to come into yourself, into where you're at and what you're doing. So I'd love to just hear maybe top 2 principles and have the group hear that too.
Well, I'll jump in. So my first one has not changed for a really long time, but transparency is definitely leading from a place of transparency is really important to me. And at times that's challenging. Sometimes you're relaying information, in ways that maybe you look back and you're like, I could have maybe said that better. Or you're relaying information that you have to relay, but maybe it's not popular. But what I have found over time is that generally speaking, trust is the most foundational thing to establish. And if you're not operating from a place with as much transparency as you can possibly afford and offer, then it's challenging to build that trust. So that's probably one. I'd say a more recent one, principle that is still sort of something that's a work in progress, has to do with noise. So operating from a place, I am a firm believer that you have to lead out front. And what that looks like for me is just literally trying to be the champion, the cheerleader, all of those things at once, be with your customers, try to set the example, and create the noise, right? Create those drum beats for your organization. But at the same time, you have to also block noise because there's lots of just little bits of time, and it could be noise in your own head. It could be noise coming from other places. So finding that balance between creating the right amount of noise and also blocking the distracting noise that's a journey. There's never perfection, but that's a second principle that is more real time and something I'm working on now.
Diane or Irina, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So one I would offer is balancing speed with risk. We can't let perfection be the enemy of good. And in technology, we sometimes think we need to get it all right. Well, sometimes I need to move fast and get it mostly right, as long as it's not opening up the back door to threat actors or whatever. So it's really thinking about speed versus risk. And the image that I share with my teams is that of somebody who is racing on a motorcycle, but has the helmet and has the padded gear, where they are appropriately de-risking themselves so they can speed. So that's one. The other is operate with the principle of make others successful. Not what do I need to do to make Diane successful, but I need to think about how I make my CEO, my board of directors, my stakeholders successful. And guess what? That will come back on me and make me successful. And even thinking about how do I make my IT team successful? Putting others first is a great way that comes back, and you will only reap benefits from doing so.
Dan, I love that. One of the ones, and we're always hiring. I think any leader is always hiring talent. When I sometimes go to restaurants and I find a good server, I'm like, what do you do? Tell me, how can we recruit you? And so I really identified with that one, especially my number one on my list is this team first mentality. How do you put the team above what it is you want? And whether it's budgets, we were going through something and we had a conversation around our table, and I remember one of my executives saying, okay, well, I can wait to hire so we can take those dollars and give it to this. And I remember sitting there thinking, okay, this is a good moment, right? Then people are putting the team first, the business, the mission first. So I love that. A second one for me is just given my roots and kind of, we came here with $270. I don't believe in no. That comes with a negative. But the positive of that is finding people who just have grit, who view it upon themselves to go figure out the solution and just keep pivoting until you figure out the how. I just think no is a lazy person's answer. You're either asking the wrong question or you're asking the wrong person. So just how do you keep pivoting to figuring it out? And that marries with curiosity, which is third. Just how do you stay a curious, growth-oriented person? One of the things, and LM said this earlier, of just how do you relearn and rebuild yourself? I feel like every 100 days, I'm constantly thinking, okay, well, what do I need to be in order to be valuable and keeping things moving? And what do I need to change? What do I need to grow? And so how do you bring people in that are okay saying what I just built a year ago is wrong and we need to break it and rebuild it? And that's a curious mindset. And then lastly, I think Diane, you said this as well, but perfection's the enemy of good. I default to action. The negative of that is I default to action. The positive of that is you default to action. Okay, so we'll get 60% of the direction. You're usually pretty close. The last 20% aren't really necessary and they take a long time to go get. Use the data. Directionally right sometimes is just good enough to get going.
Excellent. I know there's a lot of, I know there can sometimes be a challenge, I should say, with some of the sense around perfection is the enemy of good, and a sense though that you do need to be really ready to do it before you do it, or somebody might take you seriously. Is there any advice that you have maybe for the women here about how to get over that side of it? If it's a way maybe, and even phrasing it of, listen, there's speed and there's risk, and I'm going for speed here on this side. Is there anything that maybe you learned how to say, or that you've coached other women who maybe feel like it does need to be super buttoned up before they maybe take flight in any of those areas? Is there a phrase or a way that
This
maybe
one, Hillary, I feel so I have right now a 50% women ELT. I think last time I had 60 or 70%, and usually run pretty fairly down the gender kind of percents. One of the things I see from women executives a ton is they constantly say, I'm not ready for a promotion. Here's the things I don't have. Here's what the experience I don't have yet. Here's why I can't be a CEO yet. Here's why I can't be the VP. And they start with, here's why you can't. And I think one, you need people around you that will give you that push, because sometimes you just need a push to tell you you can. And two, for the two things I found helpful in working with executives is, okay, let's write down what happens if you fail. The worst thing, just put it on paper. And that applies to business decisions, that applies to career decisions. We're innately trying to protect ourselves because we don't want to fall off that motorcycle that Diane mentioned, right? But it's okay if you're not going that fast, or if you are going fast and you have padding and you're around soft things, maybe it's okay for you to fall. What happens when you fall? And there's only really, in my experience, a few things that really are that catastrophic, right? In our business, it's if I'm changing pricing or packaging, I really need to make sure that that is something that we stop and we do the right decisions for. We're doing M&A, that we need to stop because that has just material consequences, right? But there's usually only a few things in business, and same goes for your career, that have material consequences that you can't go back and undo. So what is the worst that can happen? And then two, I would actually go to somebody, if it's a career thing, that's doing the job, and ask them, what do you think I need to have? What do you think I'm missing? And I guarantee you 80% of the time, they're probably going to say, well, you have what you need. You can learn the rest on the job. I think there's this fallacy, you have to be 100% ready for the job. I think if you're 60% ready, 70%, that's great, because you want people that have 30, 40% that still are new and curious and learning, because that's what's going to make them excited about that role. If you're 100% confident in what you're doing, you need a new job. More opportunity.
So I think we should amplify that. If you're at 100%, you need a new job. That's
You
great.
do.
Yeah.
You
You
do.
need a challenge. You know?
Right. So I do have a coaching item on how I help people balance that risk, specifically to your question. And it's the concept of a one-way door versus a two-way door. A two-way door, so you can go in and you can go out, is marriage. Now, we don't go into marriage thinking it's a two-way door and there's an out, but in general, it is a contract that can be exited. Having a child is a one-way door, right? So if you think about permanence and impermanence, what can be done versus what can be undone, it helps you balance that risk on what you need to be right about and where you can take a chance. So one-way door, two-way door.
Excellent visual.
Um,
Margaret, I think you came off.
Yes, I love that. And we talk about one and two-way doors all the time. So that definitely lands and resonates with me. I would say the other thing that I really try to emphasize, and a lot of this comes back to the environment that you're in or that you're creating. But just having sort of a fail fast, and a lot of people hate that term, but it's the truth of like, and what that means to me is learn fast mentality, an experimentation culture. So obviously experimentation is essential in R&D, but I have found it's essential in just leading teams. The ability to just try things, frame it as a hypothesis. I think we can go get customers if we do blah. And then start to really just segment. Okay, to Irina's point, I have been through that Irina pressure test myself. Personally, I can attest that she really believes in it. What bad things could happen? Usually, there's not that many, right? So, what might we need to go see or validate this? And then you do it quick and you learn and you keep iterating. So, I think coming from a place of just, this is the risk, but I'm going to iterate fast and learn. If you are waiting for big, large decisions that are these, because there are not that many one-way door decisions, right? There's not. Most of the decisions are two-way door, even investment decisions. So I just encourage organizations and leaders to think about things in really small, bite-sized incremental learnings so that you can move fast, pivot, and you're not invested in, a 12-month waterfall style approach to how you're leading your teams.
I think that's amazing. If you're not failing, you're not learning. So if you're not trying, you're not learning. I think that's just a constant reminder that is always good to hear. I'm going to switch gears a little bit to a topic that we promised at the top around inclusion. And Diane, you have helped co-found T200. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and then how you're really approaching inclusion and technology and have been approaching inclusion and technology long before it was part of DEI initiatives?
Right. So T200.org is a all volunteer-led nonprofit organization that was really targeted for the top leaders of technology for organizations of $1 billion in revenue and above. So CIOs of global 500 companies. And it started with 5 of us at dinner that were introduced by a male colleague in Dallas who said, y'all need to know each other. It was Kimberly Clark, American Airlines, Textron, Rent-A-Center, and I think it was Toyota Aviation. 5 female CIOs. We looked across the table. Among us, we had $100 billion of revenue that we were leading the technology for. Holy crap! We're powering the world. And for those to whom much is given, much is expected. So we kind of looked behind us and said, wait, we need to harness this and help everyone else. So we started a WhatsApp group, each one asked 5. And then we got some sponsors to get some free technology, and we have some online collaboration tools. So we now have 300 of the world's top CIOs that are active in this group, and the next 1,000 of our business unit and divisional leaders behind us that support each other with, how do I get a board role? I need help with a new position. How do I negotiate this contract? I put something out on chat this week saying, hey, we're down selecting between these 2 software platforms. Who has done this? And we help each other. And so it's so important that you have a safe place to go to. And this was just our safe place. And we just started it. 5 at a table is all it took. It takes a whole lot more now that we're actually something, and we have, the careers of all of these women that we're helping manage. There was a question, I had a panel not too long ago, said, where do we find you on a Saturday morning? Like in front of my computer doing T200 tasks and membership committees and board things. But we need to support each other, and that we is in whatever inclusion circle you operate. So don't wait for somebody else to do it for you. Start with 5 people and move forward.
What was that line you said, Diane, of if you have pressure, you have to give?
To those whom much is given, much is expected. That one?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm full of pithy statements, so I never know which one I'm going to have here.
Thank you.
I
Beth.
totally agree with that, and I think that for me, it's another thing that has shaped me in terms of like that support group. I firmly believe in, ladies supporting ladies, gals supporting gals, but I also feel like it takes more than that. And I'm super fortunate that throughout my career and even today, that I have had great male mentors as well and supporters that really just are gender blind. And I think that is so, so critical that you surround yourself with people who see you, not what's on the outside, but really what's on the inside and what's in the heart and also what's in the brain as well. So I just want to like continue to emphasize that it truly does take a village, and you've got to don't push it, but find the right small group of people that challenge you to think about all those different perspectives as well. And it can be anybody.
I think that's a great call out. I believe your board that you have
Mhm.
should maybe just all be
It's all
functional
male.
like
Yeah,
you
that's
do.
right.
It can
It
be a
is.
really, really diverse, amazing group. I
Mhm.
think that's really powerful. Thank you.
Totally.
All right. I know we're coming up on time, and so I wanted to ask maybe one last question, and then we'll try to get everybody out 5 minutes to the hour so they can get going with their day. And this is a time travel question. So if you would, take out your time travel machine and then go back to a point in your career where you would love to give yourself advice that you either did not receive that you wish you would have had, or advice that you received, which maybe was meant to be constructive but was destructive, and you really want to change how that was shared with you. So jump into that time travel machine and give us some of your advice from your younger self that you wish you would have had.
Mine would have been was pretty early in my product career, and I am a very enthusiastic, passionate personality type, and I was given feedback that I really needed to try to, I mean, even down to like hand motions and hand movements, try to conform into, again, probably a persona that was maybe needed more at that time, but I think I probably lost a good 2, 3 years of just being so self-conscious and worried about it. It goes back to Irina's earlier point of putting mental energy in all the places that did not matter. And finally, at one point, I had someone else that said, just be yourself. It's okay to be excited. It's okay to be passionate. Just be authentically you. And it was sort of an unlock moment that should not have had to have been said. But I think you've got to be able, as you're surrounding yourself with people who have great advice, you have to also recognize that not every piece of advice is great advice. And so being able to internalize it, be, reflective and think about it, but not take everything so literally, just plug it in and continue on and be yourself. I think that would be the point. I'm still thankful for it. I wouldn't change anything, but that was probably a defining moment for me.
Thank you. Rena, Diane?
Sure. So life is hard. Work is hard. But sometimes there's great times. So when you have the great eras, you're loving a role, you're having a good relationship, you've got enough money in your bank account, whatever defines a good era for you, create a light post and a marker and give yourself the space to say, I'm going to remember this period of time that's good, because tomorrow could really suck. We are going to experience losses in business, losses in life. We go through pandemics, and to be able to weather those times, you need the markers. And of course, now I'm old, so I can look backwards and realize there's good times and those bad times. But that would be the advice back then, is mark those times, because you're really going to need them when life or work sucks.
I love that. I love the milestone marker on the highway visual for that. That's a really great way to take a look at it. Irina, sorry, didn't mean to jump in.
No. I don't know if it would be advice going back. I would say advice just to everyone, that, you know, in talking to leaders is one of the things that I come across a lot is people don't actively plan their career. They just kind of float from one thing to another, and you don't have to know the title that you want, but you should know the experiences that you want to get. And how do you be really proactive of you wouldn't go to work and just work every day without knowing what your outcome you're trying to achieve or the goal you're trying to achieve. So how do you work backwards to say whether it's in the next 12, 18 months, these are the type of experiences I want to have, or in the next 2, 3 years, here's the role I want to get to. And being just very vocal about it, and then making sure you're talking to your leaders about it to say, hey, here's where I want to get. Here's the experiences I want to get. Here's the title I want to get to. Here's the role I want to get. Here's the scope I want to get. Whatever it is that your goals are, and making sure you're walking through it, and not in the context of I need to move fast to get there, but in the context of here's where I think I have strengths in. What other opportunities do you think I need to get exposure to? What other experiences do I need to get? So that you're not the only one that is planning that personal roadmap for you, that you're investing and bringing others along for the ride, because you're sometimes not in rooms that you need to be when decisions are getting made. And you want somebody to say, oh, well, Irina really wanted this experience that, why don't we put her on that team? And so the more that you're open, because nobody's good at reading minds, the more you're vocalizing what it is that you want, and the more you're planning for it, the more you're putting it out into the universe to allow yourself to get that exposure. And then I think the second thing I would say is, and this goes back to the vulnerability and authenticity that we talk a lot about, but if you don't feel like you can bring your authentic self to the role or the environment that you're in, you're most likely in the wrong place. You're going to have a ceiling if you can't be authentically yourself, because nobody can manage being a high performer and doing the mental gymnastics of what do I have to be? How do I say this? How do I react? It's just too exhausting. And so at some point, you're going to have a conversation of you're probably in the wrong place. And for me in my career, that I had to earn the right for myself to have that conversation, because, you know, I had to have financial independence. I needed to earn the experience set. And then when I kind of got there, I wish I got there a little earlier and gave myself the permission to get there earlier. And so that's one of the things that I would say. And then third, you should be learning. Part of what makes these roles exciting, and if you have the privilege of pressure in your role, and it is a privilege to have a job where you have pressure that you have to achieve, that you want to achieve. Not everybody gets to have that in their career, in their environment. You should be putting yourself in situations where you're learning. And so this goes back to, if you feel like you have this on cruise, and maybe in that point in your life you need to be on cruise, that's okay too. But otherwise, how do you raise your hand to say, I want to learn something else? I don't understand financials. Can I help with the project? And kind of putting yourself into uncomfortable territory. And you know, I joke that I like to be uncomfortable at least once a week, and that's either with a conversation you're having, it's in something you're learning, but how do you have that butterfly feeling of, oh gosh, this doesn't feel so great and comfortable. And I think that is where you're just constantly pushing yourself to be better and to learn.
Well, ladies, thank you so much. If I could time travel back, I would have thought, this is such an amazing experience to be able to be here. And I'll try not to cry, but people who know me know I cry. Thank you so much. I didn't think I would have the honor to ever do an interview or a panel in this capacity with such amazing women and what they've done, paved, and continue to do. Your first steps, we love to follow in your footsteps. And it's been just wonderful to have you here sharing. The chat is like going bananas with people talking about this. So I want to flip it to Danya so we can make sure to get that survey out to folks, and just cannot thank the three of you enough for sharing your time, your talents, and just your stories to help really enrich and empower
Thank
all
you
the
to you,
women
Hillary.
and men that have joined.
Thank you to Hillary and for Insight for prioritizing this, and that invests in leadership that's diverse and thinking differently and constantly kind of walking the talk.
Yeah, we are thrilled to have this and have Danya, who runs our DEI programming at Insight, do this webinar for everyone. It really is a gift, and we're so excited to share it. So thank you for that.
Yes. Thanks, everyone. The survey is going to pop up as you exit the Zoom link, and we appreciate you joining us for this hour. Bye, y'all.
Thank you. Thanks, Insight.
Ellie, Margaret, bye, Dan. Thanks for the valuable.
Bye.